Hi, my name is Karolina Sieler, and I am a former law lecturer here in London, as well as the founder of a platform called firstclasslb.com, which helps law students just like you to get the first in their law essays and their law exams, and just provides generally a lot of advice about how do you arrange your study in law school. So what I want to talk to you about today is how to study in law school in order to get a first. And I'm sure you have thought about it many times since you started studying in law school. And it's a topic that a lot of students ask me about, and a question that they ask themselves. And unfortunately, the universities and the lecturers don't really tell you how to do it. They will usually tell you something like, oh, you have to work hard, you have to read everything that we put on online, all the materials, and you have to read all the textbook chapters, and just really work hard and do thorough research for your essays, revise everything for the exams. Now, all of that is actually not true. That's really not the only way to get a first. And I would actually say that a lot of those things that lecturers recommend students to do sometimes can get away in the students getting a first. So I have a few things that I want to share with you that have worked for my students over the years, and that I've also kind of understood when I was teaching as a lecturer at a university, when I was teaching law. And hopefully if you follow those things, you'll get yourself much closer to getting a first than if you just kind of follow general advice that you hear from your friends or your lecturers. So the first thing that I would highly recommend for you to do is to follow a proven study strategy. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of students, their studying is just all over the place. So they will start by reading a bit from the textbook, then they will drop it, they will go to a lecture, sometimes they will skip a lecture, and it just happens because it just so happens because they are so overwhelmed with the amount of work that they are supposedly meant to do, that of course they lose motivation to do it eventually. So what I would like you to do instead is to pick a few crucial elements of studying in a way that can really help you get a first, both in your essays and exams, and turn these into your own strategy and follow it with every single subject. Now, what I have done is I have created a winning strategy for my law students, which has been tested over the years by so many students, and I've put it all in my first class law exam revision course, so you might want to check that out on my website. I'll provide a link to it down below. But in general, what you need to pay attention to are things like, of course, completing all of your reading on time. But when I say all of your reading, I don't mean every single thing that the lecturer is recommending on the online platform or in the notes. I mean just knowing which materials to select and only sticking to those. So, for example, the textbook chapters for some of the topics in the module, you can just skim through instead of reading it in full, and you will get an equally good benefit from it as if you had read the whole chapter. So just make sure that you know which reading to do, and not to fall for the trap of wanting to read everything, because then you can definitely not read it on time. What I mean by on time is usually you would want to do it right after the lecture, when your memory from the lecture is still quite fresh, and you can kind of remember what the lecturer was talking about. So the thing to do is during your lectures, you should just purely focus on preparing quick, brief revision notes that have summaries of the most relevant definitions, cases and statute sections. And I've talked about this before in many other videos. But yeah, you should really not write everything down. That doesn't help anybody, and it wastes a lot of your time and energy. So don't try to write everything down that your lecturer is saying. Now, also, this attendance in general in classes is mandatory for in many law schools. Even if it isn't, I would encourage you to attend the lectures. I know that most of them can be quite boring, and it's just because we're so used to kind of a different way of studying, kind of, learning more when we are up for it, and learning from YouTube, and just being a lot more progressive in how the knowledge is passed on to you. But unfortunately, there are a lot of useful things that the lecturer can say during the lecture, which we might miss out on if you don't attend the lectures and you don't pay attention. So one of those things for sure is they will usually indicate during the lecture what topics are important and what topics are not so important during the for the exams. And very often they might also give you guidance on the coursework, so you don't want to miss out on that one. At least if you're going to skip some classes, make sure they are the classes that the lecturer is not going to talk anything about what you should study for the exam. If there is an opportunity, and I think there's plenty if you can find time for it, you should try to find some additional classes and read additional textbooks and materials about how to write better law essays and how to write better law exams. There are a lot of textbooks available out there. My experience and the experience of my students with most of the textbooks that were available is that they weren't really... It was difficult for the students to understand from the textbooks how they should write a law essay. And for that reason, I've created a course about essay writing, which is called First Class Law Essay Writing course. And also I'm going to provide a link to it down below, where I kind of talked you through with videos and with actual essay examples, and through how to cover all of those elements of writing a first class law essay. So whether you're going to reach out for my course or other courses available online or other materials available online, make sure that before you start writing your essays and before you try to attempt your first exam, if possible, if you haven't done it in the past, you learn and study a little bit about how do you actually get a first, because it's not something that comes intuitively. Another thing that I want to mention is you have to select your study material strategically. So there's a lot of stuff out there. There are the textbooks, and among the textbooks you can just find normal, general, standard textbooks that just talk about different subjects, different topics within the subject and describe the law. You can also find those slightly thicker textbooks that contain cases and materials on specific topic, which usually include extracts from specific cases, judgments, and discuss them in a little bit more detail. And then you have journal articles, and then you have revision guides and revision notes, which are a lot more simple. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to fall into the trap of, I'm going to attend the lecture and then I'm going to read all of the chapters in the textbook that are relevant, and then I'm going to read all of the journal articles that are relevant to that topic, because trust me, you will not do it. You just won't have enough time and you will lose your motivation because you won't understand half of the things that these materials will be talking about. So what you need to do instead is start by reaching out for something more simple, like a basics book or a revision note on specific topics, or a revision guide, and plenty of materials are available out there. I have also started creating a series of revision notes on different subjects, and you can check those out on my website, but there's a link in the video down below to those if you're interested. But those materials that are a little more simplified will actually help you to understand the topic much, much better. So even before the lecture, it's something that you could read, and then you could attend the lecture, read it again, and try to understand the topic a lot better before you embark on skimming through a textbook chapter on that specific topic, if you will decide to do it. Another thing that students often don't understand, which is why they kind of fail to get a first in both their essays and their exams. So there is a big difference between how you should study for your essay and how you should study for your exam. So in terms of your essay, you should go deeply into the topic, and just do a very thorough research. So this is the time when you are going to have to read not just the revision notes and not just the textbook chapter in full on a given topic of your essay, but also those more complicated textbooks like cases and materials, and also a lot of journal articles that you will have to at least skim through to try to get an idea of what other academics have to say about the topic of your essay. So in the essays, you kind of go deep, but you go very narrow. So you don't want to end up reading 3-4 different textbook chapters that are going to be more or less relevant, but not really. You want to go deep, focus on one textbook chapter, and then a range of articles, journal articles that are actually related specifically to your topic. Now, for the exams, on the other hand, you should focus on selected exam topics, but you will have a few different topics to study, but you're not going to study them nowhere near as thoroughly as you had studied for your essays. So what you do instead is it's perfectly fine to kind of skim through the textbooks chapters that are relevant for those topics that you're going to revise for the exam. But most importantly, you should revise from pre-prepared revision guides or revision notes that kind of give you a selected number of cases and statute sections and definitions, which are very few per topic and which are only the most important per topic, so that you're actually able to understand, okay, these are the few things that I need to understand and remember for each topic, and then you can practice writing your exam answers on a specific topic to try to figure out how to use them when writing your answer. But the bottom line is you're gonna want to avoid reading, for example, journal articles on each topic, and also avoid reading those more complicated textbooks like cases and materials on each topic that you're going to be revising for the exam. If you do that, you're very likely to maybe not fail your exam, but definitely not get a first. Because even if you think you're being more thorough, you're actually not going to be able to learn as much of the most important and key and crucial definitions, cases, and statute sections before your exam. So these are kind of the basics of how you attempt to get a first in both your essays and your exams in law school in general. If you want to learn more about it, make sure to check out the materials, the courses and the revision guides that I have on my website, and they will definitely help you out with getting a much better idea of how do you get a first, specifically in your essay writing and specifically in your exams, and then in individual subjects that are taught at the LLB level as well. So that's it for me for today. Thanks so much for listening, and if you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more similar videos in the future.